Welcome to Grandeur Decoded, where we dissect the world's most spectacular achievements and expose the strategy, engineering, and stubborn human obsession that make them possible. Today, we're decoding a building that breaks almost every rule of architecture, scheduling, and patience. It's a project that has outlived its architect, multiple wars, several political regimes, and the invention of computers, and it's still not done. This is the Sagrada Família in Barcelona, and these are 10 decoded facts that explain how a 19th century dream is finally, seriously, closing in on completion in our lifetime. Let's start with a question. How do you keep one construction project going for more than 140 years without the world giving up on it? Fact 1 is that Sagrada Família was never meant to be fast. Construction began in 1882 as a fairly standard neo-Gothic church. Antoni Gaudí took over in 1883, completely transformed the design, and then devoted the last decades of his life almost exclusively to this one building. By the time he died in 1926, only about a quarter of the basilica was complete, roughly one facade, a crypt, and a portion of the apse. On paper, that sounds like failure, but Gaudí was playing a longer game. He designed the church knowing future generations would be the ones to finish it, as long as the core ideas were strong enough to survive him. Fact 2. This isn't just another famous church. It is on track to be the tallest one on Earth. The central tower of Jesus Christ is designed to reach about 172 to 172.5 meters, just under 566 feet. In late 2025, when a new section of the tower was lifted into place, Sagrada Família officially overtook Germany's Ulm Minster to become the world's tallest church, even before the tower is finished. Gaudí set himself a constraint, though. He refused to let the basilica rise higher than Montjuic Hill because he believed a human work should never surpass the height of nature. So even its record-breaking height is capped by a moral rule, not just engineering. Fact 3 is where the building stops feeling like classic Gothic and starts feeling almost alien. Gaudí didn't design his structure using flat drawings alone. He built hanging models out of string and tiny weights to find the ideal shape for each arch and column. When you flip a hanging chain upside down, you get what's called a catenary arch, a curve that's naturally perfect for carrying weight in compression. Gaudí photographed these upside-down models and used them as blueprints. Over a century later, engineers have recreated his method with digital tools and confirmed that the load paths are incredibly efficient. That's why the interior feels impossibly tall and open without the heavy flying buttresses you see on older cathedrals. Fact 4. The interior columns aren't really columns in the classic sense. They're a structural forest. Gaudí experimented with inclined pillars, branching forms, and complex surfaces like hyperboloids and helicoids. Instead of a straight column rising to a flat ceiling, each support splits and twists like the trunk and branches of a tree, distributing loads across multiple paths. When light pours in through the stained glass, it hits these angled carved surfaces and seems to move like sunlight through leaves. It looks symbolic, but it's also structural logic. Gaudí was effectively doing a kind of early parametric design, adjusting forms based on how forces flow, decades before architecture software existed. Fact 5 is where the story gets rough. After Gaudí's death, work continued slowly, guided by his models and drawings. Then, in 1936, during the Spanish Civil War, parts of the unfinished church and Gaudí's workshop were attacked and burned. Many plaster models were smashed, drawings and plans were destroyed. For most projects, that would have been the end. Instead, surviving fragments were rescued and stored, and after the war, teams spent years painstakingly reassembling broken models like three-dimensional jigsaw puzzles. They used old photographs, recollections from Gaudí's assistants, and whatever documentation remained to reconstruct his geometry. One of the quiet miracles of Sagrada Família is not just that it kept building upward, it managed to reconstruct its own design language after a near-total loss of source material. Fact 6. Almost all of this has been paid for without government money. From the beginning, Sagrada Família was conceived as an expiatory temple, funded by donations. Today, the vast majority of its budget comes from ticket sales and private contributions. Millions of visitors every year essentially buy more stone, more scaffolding, more time on cranes. There is no state rescue plan in the background. That makes it one of the only mega projects on Earth where ordinary tourists are literally paying, ticket by ticket, to finish a 19th century vision. Fact 7 is about the technology gap between Gaudi's time and ours, and how the project managed to bridge it. For decades, progress was slow because shaping his complex geometry by hand was brutally time-consuming. That changed when architects began using computer-aided design and digital scanning. Today, teams use 3D models, laser surveys, and numerically controlled stone-cutting machines to produce pieces with millimeter accuracy. Engineers have even run high-end structural and seismic simulations on the towers, refining their design so they meet modern safety codes while still following Gaudi's original logic. You're looking at a rare case where 21st century analysis is used to protect a 19th century idea rather than overwrite it. Fact 8. Each major facade is a different emotional chapter, not just a different side of the building. The Nativity facade, the one most closely associated with Gaudi himself, is dense, ornate, and almost overflowing with carved symbolism about life and creation. The Passion facade, designed and executed later, is stripped back and angular, using sharp lines and stark figures to communicate suffering and death. The Glory facade, still being completed, is planned as the grand entrance, representing spiritual ascent and the final destination. Walking around the outside of the basilica is like walking through a 3-act story carved in stone: birth, sacrifice, and transcendence. Fact 9 takes us inside the engineering again. Barcelona sits in a region with moderate seismic risk, and Sagrada Familia's central towers are massive masonry structures. Modern engineers had to show that these stone towers could withstand realistic earthquake scenarios without transferring dangerous forces to the older foundations and crypt below. To do that, they built detailed structural models and ran non-linear seismic analyses, the kind of thing Gaudi could never have imagined in his lifetime. The result is a hybrid approach. The towers are built in stone but in carefully engineered post-tension panels that keep weight under control and improve performance. In other words, the building looks like pure masonry. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of quiet contemporary engineering at work. And fact 10. After more than a century of maybe someday, the timeline is finally specific. The interior was completed and consecrated as a basilica in 2010, which marked a psychological turning point. People could finally attend Mass inside a space that felt finished, even as cranes still framed the skyline. Since then, construction has accelerated. By 2025, Sagrada Familia had already become the tallest church in the world, as the central tower climbed past 162 meters. Current plans aim for the Tower of Jesus Christ to reach its full height around 2026, timed to the 100th anniversary of Gaudi's death, with remaining decorative work and the full Glory facade expected to extend into the 2030s. For the first time since the 1880s, there is a realistic end in sight. Here's the real takeaway. Most buildings are designed to impress the people who will see them in the next few decades. Sagrada Familia was designed to impress people who weren't even born when the first stone was laid, including you. It has survived the loss of its architect, the destruction of its models, political chaos, funding droughts, and a complete revolution in building technology. Yet the core vision is still recognizably Gaudi's. Your brain is wired to notice patterns that survive against the odds, and this building is one giant slow-motion example of that. It rewards anyone who looks twice. The longer you stare, the more the logic behind the shape starts to reveal itself. There's also a social gravity at work here. Millions of people from around the world choose, every year, to spend their time and money walking through a construction site that isn't finished yet. That is pure social proof. On some level, when you see all those cranes and all those visitors, your mind reads it as a signal. This must be worth it. Otherwise, why would everyone keep coming back? That feedback loop keeps the project funded, keeps the work moving, and keeps Gaudi's idea psychologically alive long after his lifetime. By the time the last crane comes down, Sagrada Familia will be more than just the tallest church on the planet. It will be a record of how far people are willing to go to keep one idea alive, across wars, across economic cycles, across generations. And if this is what one building can do, it raises a bigger question. Which of the things we're building now will still be worth finishing 140 years from today? If you enjoyed decoding this story, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next masterpiece we pull apart.